KartKraft could easily be described as one of sim racing's biggest what-ifs. Whilst the player counts don't necessarily match that of Assetto Corsa or AC Evo, it was one that had a lot of hype around it for years, but it ended up in controversy, most notably in early 2025. Here the servers were shut down for good, at the height of the first phase of the Stop Killing Games campaign. In this video we're going to talk a little bit about the game, we're going to talk about what it is, we're going to talk about my experiences with it, and I'm going to give you a bit of a recommendation when it comes to KartKraft. Firstly, it's worth asking what it is, and what I'm going to link in the description down below is a mega thread by DJ Phil07, who talked about the game and did an in memoriam back in February when it looked like the servers were shut down for good. The game itself started off as Kart Sim. The ideas go all the way back to 2008. But for a lot of people, what they'll first particularly be aware of is when it went on to Steam Greenlight. Does anybody else remember Steam Greenlight? It was such a big thing because it was where people got their games approved for development on the Steam platform. Doesn't really happen anymore, and that's why you end up with so much of the, what people call AI-generated slop on the Steam marketplace today. But it got Steam Greenlight approval back in 2014. I think back then it was still called Kart Sim. But the early access for the sim started in late 2018, and according to various different charts, that is when its user base was at an all-time high, a peak of 200 or approximately 200 different users. There were some peaks and troughs over the years, fueled by DLC and also streaming creators for sim racing through 2020 and 2021, but the full title was released on the 26th of January 2022, the most recent peak, which, depending on who you're looking at, was approximately 180 different players. But since then, the momentum has sort of stalled out. Now, part of it, people will argue, was the acquisition by Motorsport Games. That happened in 2021. Motorsport Games, the entity behind Le Mans Ultimate, massively expanded at this time and picked up contracts for NASCAR, for IndyCar, for the BTCC. And in the end, the only one they were able to really deliver was the World Endurance Championship. But until then, KartKraft was the flagship release because NASCAR 21 Ignition was critically panned, and for fans of sim racing who were looking for a new title by Motorsport Games, this was pretty much it. Which made the 2023 studio shutdown a massive punch in the gut for sim racing fans. And that punch in the gut turned to complete anger when in early 2025 the server stopped working. It looked like this game was going the way of the original crew, that Motorsport Games was doing a Ubisoft and they were just going to kill the game. But alas, it was restored, and that's why I'm able to talk about myself playing it today. I've had it on my wish list for years, and I do literally mean years. And I picked it up recently when there was a big sale on for sim racing and racing titles, amongst other things such as GTR2, which I've recently done a review for. You can check that out, either linked in the description section down below or elsewhere on my channel. So, without further ado, history lesson complete, let's talk about the game. Now I want to start off with what KartKraft includes. It includes a handful of different venues from around the world. In addition to the fictional KartKraft circuit, which is in the hangar, you have the Atlanta Motorsports Park, Paul Fletcher International, the Go-Kart Club of Victoria, the Geelong Kart Club, International Club of Genk, Brente Monte, and Wilton Mill. Some of these are big names in either the national or even the international scene in karting. In addition to that, the kart classes go from KA100 through the X30 to KZ2. It also then includes some extra ones like Kart Cross, which is a bit like the kind of cross kart that you saw in Dirt Rally 2 and similar to the one that you're going to be seeing added into iRacing soon, and the Monster Kart, which is two chassis put together with a massive engine on the back of it. That one is only from Praga. Kart Cross is from itself as well, but the other manufacturers which are spread across K100, X30 and KZ2 are Arrow, CRG, Deadly, Formula K, Monaco, OK1, Praga and Sodi Kart. And in terms of game modes, you have the ability to practice by yourself, you have the ability to race against up to 12.5 AI, you also have the ability to do time trial, which is a tete-a-tete thing, kind of head-to-head 1v1, where you set a lap up against a ghost, and if you beat them, you progress up the order. I had a lot of fun on that one. I think I probably ended up enjoying that mode more than any of the others that I tried out. There is also online multiplayer, but it's not really got much in the way of activity. I'm reminded of a video that I watched recently. It was a video by the channel Moydog about the Beyond the Wire game, a first-person shooter set during World War One, which was under the title The Worst Milsim in Gaming History. And actually, there are a lot of parallels which I'll explore later on about unrealised potential within that game. But I do want to talk about the positives before I talk about any of the other aspects of KartKraft. And I'm going to start off by talking about the graphics. It looks amazing. It really does. And it's great to see something happening from such a small team. I know people talk about how great Unreal Engine is, but you can make an Unreal Engine game and still not have it look 100%. In fact, that's one of the main criticisms about one of my favourite racing games out there at the moment, EA Sports WRC, which used Unreal Engine 4, and people say it looks less realistic than the old Codemasters Ego engine. And building on that, I think that the tracks are built relatively well as well. I have had a couple of physics glitches with curbs, but again, it's one of those things that when it comes to a smaller developed title, I could expect something like that every once in a while. Heck, iRacing has tons of those things as well. I'm not creating any excuses here, but in terms of the standard, I'm not going to hold it to a higher standard than I would something like iRacing or Assetto Corsa or R-Factor. In fact, I know that I haven't driven these tracks in real life. I've seen lots of photos of them, I've seen races around them, and I know a lot of people who have done races around them, either competitively or just for fun. And what you get from tracks like Wilton Mill or PFI matches that description. And I also want to give the handling model a lot of praise as well. There are going to be some limitations I will talk about in a moment, but in the meantime I want to just say this is really well built around direct drive wheels. And the reason why I say that is because this is at a time when we are transitioning to direct drive wheels being the standard. 2022, the time of the game's full release, is around the time that a lot of people started picking up the CSL DD, which made DD wheels a lot more affordable for the regular consumer. It's around the time that we're about to start seeing Moser burst onto the scene. It's before the Logitech GT-DD. It's even before the Thrustmaster T818 DD wheel. So this is really good in terms of a technological standpoint. And the reason why I say this is because with karting, a lot of the physics comes through what you feel. It comes through the G-forces. On the steering wheel column, and I will get into this again, like I said, in a moment, the only thing that you feel is the stuff that you would feel in the steering wheel. And that is, regardless of how much you would enjoy something like that, immersion. It is an immersive experience. It works really well for that because you can tell what the developer had in mind. They had in mind that this would be used by people who, if they wanted to have the full karting experience, they would be investing more in the sim so they could get the G-force effects. But like I mentioned, it is worth talking about the drawbacks, and we are going to stick with the handling model and the DD integration because I do like it. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful to have something like that because it feels like you're driving a kart with that feeling through the wheel. The downside is you don't get any of the other effects. Now, part of that is just because that's what karting is. Karting, you feel a lot more of the movement with your body. When compared to something like F1 when they have the ground effect, you're not necessarily going to feel it like you would feel a kart. The technique is a bit more similar, but it's not the same. And as a result, this probably feels best if you've got a properly calibrated motion rig. Because that is what karting is. Karting is about you driving with your full body, feeling yourself going side to side. You can feel the grip of the kart, you can feel when it's slipping away. Because the best way to drive a kart is to make sure that you are carrying as much speed as possible and pushing the grip to the very limit. You can't really do that when you just have it through a wheel. I think I could probably get to a better standard if I spent a lot more time in the sim, but it's probably part of why the KartKraft car was the thing that I was best in, because it is closest to a real car. It is closest in terms of the feeling through the wheel. It is closest in terms of the level of grip. You're not expecting to be pushing yourself to the very limit. But when it came to driving any of the other cars, it felt a bit like a step up from something like Gran Turismo. And I play Gran Turismo on a controller, so yeah. But another thing is, there very clearly was the idea of doing some kind of career mode. You start off with a bit of money, and you can spend that money starting off your career. But if you go to the shop and you try to buy a kart, it won't take the money out of your account. After a while, I figured this out, because I went into a race thinking, okay, I need to earn money if I want to get to the next level of kart, because I'm assuming you have to own the kart and be able to race it. And you do have to own the kart to be able to race it. But you don't need to earn the money to do it. In fact, there's no way of earning money in the game. You can't earn it from doing a certain amount of laps in practice. You can't do it from winning races. You can't do it through the online, as far as I'm aware, and you can't do it through the time trial. So it's one of those things that, well, I said it earlier in the video, just demonstrates this unrealized potential within the game. And this missing career mode also then brings me to talking about the variety of the tracks and mods. Because, well, much like with Retrospective, which is another sim that I've tried out multiple times, there are tracks in KartKraft that are designated as mod tracks, but there is no mod kit. There's no way of being able to build tracks for the game like you could in R-Factor or Assetto Corsa, much like with Retrospective. So, for me, it's nice to see the tracks in here, but I would also have loved to be able to find a way to download these mods and build these mods so that we could have, say, a Buckmore Park, or we could end up with different venues that may no longer exist. You could end up with ones like the Silverstone Stowe Circuit from Gran Turismo, because porting things across Gran Turismo into modern sim racing titles is one of the biggest trends, right? I mean, look at what happens with Assetto Corsa. How many of those do you probably have installed? If you have an AC installed in Content Manager, you're probably lying if you're telling me you don't have a Gran Turismo or maybe a Forza circuit installed as one of the mods. So as a result, when it comes to putting a recommendation through on whether or not you should buy KartKraft, it's very difficult to come to a conclusion. Because it's built to be expanded upon, but the expansions aren't necessarily there. If you want to race against other people, you're going to have to find a league. There probably are some communities there in the world that do stuff in KartKraft, and so you'll be able to try that out. But for the single player experience, it's fun, but it doesn't realise the full potential. It's what reminds me of this Beyond the Wire video that I mentioned earlier. Beyond the Wire is a game where they have a group who go onto the servers once a week, and they will go in and play it, and that's when you get the peak in all-time player counts, because otherwise there are only one or two other people playing the game. KartKraft has more. I think I've seen a dozen or so at the 24-hour peaks in recent weeks and months. Now that is because the game has been on sale, but at the same time, if you can find a community that works around it, then the online stuff is good. Aside from that, it is worth picking up in a sale. I wouldn't say pay the full price for it, because at the same time as wanting to reward a developer who put in 15 years to making it from the early concepts of Kart Sim to the final release of KartKraft under the Motorsport Games banner, it just hasn't been continued on. And with Motorsport Games now focusing on the Le Mans Ultimate stuff that is still ongoing and adding the occasional bit into R-Factor 2, you probably won't expect any major updates for KartKraft, especially since the studio was closed down by Motorsport Games in 2023. So, by all means, if you want to have probably the best karting experience in sim racing, pick it up. But unless you have this dedicated community that you're going into and you have the money to be able to spend, like you might have been deciding between this or another car in iRacing, I would wait until a sale. Because then you can get it for a handful of quid, and if you get it for a fiver, it's definitely worth it. You'll probably get a dozen or so hours out of it, maybe spread over time, and maybe you'll be like, oh yes, I remember owning that game. There's a league in it, I might give that a go. That is where it sits for me. And that's that for this video, folks. Thank you so much for watching and joining. If you've tried out KartKraft, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and let me know what you thought about this style of video. I really enjoyed making recent videos like I did for Grid Extra and for GTR 2, so I want to try and build on something a bit like that. So if I hit the mark, please do let me know. And if you do want to stick around for more videos like this, as well as live streams and videos about different mods and video games and upcoming ones and retrospectives about games that are older, please do stick around. And if you're looking for something for the real world of motorsport, you can find my other channel in the description section as well, where you can find daily videos covering things from F1, the WRC and WEC, to things like NASCAR, the BTCC and Super Formula. But until then, it's bye-bye for now.